All right. 12.2. Not a real long one. Has some information about talking about the carrying value of bonds. We have to pay some interest, have an interest expense. We're going to have a calculated, stated, uh, off the state interest rate of an interest payment for doing these. So then the difference is either going to be a discount or a premium. So we're going to journalize interest payments for bonds at either a discount or a premium, depending on how we will go about doing things. And we either will credit discount bond payable or whatever, or we'll debit the premium. It just depends. So we're going to talk about it. All right. So journalizing for paying interest on a bonds payable. Okay. They talk about how the example for equipment, they're required to pay semi-annual interest payments, which means every 6 months, give or take, right? Semi-annual, just depends when they start. But they want to pay these interest payments. Forest pays an interest amount to a trustee. Okay, so that's not horribly necessarily important, but this amortization table will allow you to figure out what the total payment's going to be, and we have these, the carrying value, what the bond's going to end up being, our interest payment that we will calculate using these certain interest rates. When we calculate the interest payment here, this $3,000, that is off the stated interest rate, and then the interest expense is figured out off of this effective interest rate. And we use the carrying value, and so we'll just walk through all this. But this will kind of help us figure out how to go about doing things. So it says Forest issues these bonds at a certain price. You can read this on your own. But the market interest rate at the times the bonds are issued is called the effective interest rate. So when the bonds are actually issued, that is the effective interest rate. When the bonds are retired or when they're called in, right, the bonds receive more money than they paid for the bonds. That's when they're doing this. That's equal to the discount, gives these guys a way of making some extra money. And how we go about finding this is you take the face value of the bond, which they tell you, the face value, and you multiply it by the stated interest rate. Like I said, the stated interest rate times the fraction of the year, semi-annual, so half the year, 0.5, gives you the interest payment. Okay? Now, our principles that you have to follow, these generally accepted accounting principles, say we require that we have to pay this over a specific period of time, this 6 months, whatever, and reducing this amount over time is called this bond amortization. So we're going to be doing this so that we have a payment that we will pay. Now you can see in this situation when the interest rates are not the same and the effective interest rate's a little at 6.2 above the stated, there's going to be some interest that is not going to be paid. And so we need to add that to the beginning carrying value to get an ending carrying value. Okay? And that's what they're talking about, and that's what they're working with this bond amortization. Face value of the bond is adjusted like we're showing you here, and the ending value, or when we adjust it with this extra expense that we see, this is the new carrying value. Interest expense is based on carrying value multiplied by the effective interest rate. So that's what we're talking about when we're showing you these. Okay. So face value times stated interest rate gives us our payment. The carrying value times the effective interest rate, the one that's set at the time of when we do our the bond itself, is going to be a little bit different. And this is what we'll be calling our interest expense. All right. And then what we'll do is this discount on bonds payable, which is a contra account to bonds payable that we kind of worked with last week. We are now going to credit that because this discount on bonds payable is actually a contra account, has a normal debit account. But when we have this extra amount, this discount, it will be credited. And you'll see from our T accounts down here that the balance will go down. Because when you credit discount on bonds payable, it has a normal debit balance. That's what we learned last week. Okay, so we'll have to figure these items out, and then we just fill in the blanks. So when you're paying interest on a bond that's at a discount, you're going to debit interest expense for the amount. When you take it, the carrying value times the effective interest rate times the time of this one, you'll get that amount debited. The cash that we're paying out is this $3,000 payment, and then the discount on the bond will be credited. So that's what you're doing. So we're going to do this at the end of the year, and they kind of just talk about it. All right, the interest is debited. Yeah, so again, this is all they're talking about. Now the carrying value can be done a couple different ways. The bond payable minus the discount that is remaining gives you the carrying value. But also if you're here, you have the carrying value of 91. They give us this carrying value. We have this amortization of 73.69 because that's the leftover amount after our payment. You add that together and you get the ending carry value. So there's a couple different ways of doing it. But debit the expense that you find, you credit cash, and then the difference on a discount is credited to the discount on bond payable. Amount of interest paid on the bond is the same whether the bond is done at a discount or a premium, so it doesn't matter. So here's an example of paying on a premium. The face value of this and the bonds are done on a premium, so we know the carrying value. Okay. Once you get the carrying value, then you take the carrying value times the effective interest rate, okay, which is the same as what we did up here. Carrying value times the effective interest rate times the time. So it's the same thing. But with a premium, we add the amount to the face value and get the carrying value. And then with our payment, it's the same. When we have the face value times the stated interest rate times the time. So even though it's a premium, when we did our expense, face value times stated interest rate times time. So that's why that doesn't change. It's regardless, it's going to be a discount or premium, it's going to be the same. And so when we have our transaction, it says paid cash to a trustee for first semi-annual interest payment on a bond, $15,000. Okay, so we made our payment of $15,000, so that's our cash credit. Our interest expense is the amount that we found, and the difference is the premium on the bond payable. So this is how we will journalize a bond that's done on a premium. This is how we will do the bond at a discount. Okay, and then you can see and notice that the premium goes down. You get a new balance. You get the cash. So this is the T account for that one. They kind of show you all this. So when we have the carrying value, the ending carry, and when we buy it at a premium, goes down a little bit because we're paying a little more than what was expensed out. So that is the notes for 12.2. Now, as we're looking at things, here are the directions for 12.2. And it says paid cash to trustee. This is the work together. We paid cash to trustee for semi-annual interest payment on a $300,000 6% bond having a carrying value of $296 with a 6.3 effective interest rate. So, if you were to take notes or look through this, you just got to make sure you know what you're taking the effective interest rate. You're taking the effective interest rate times the carrying value to get the interest expense. You always are using the time. But when we're doing the interest payment, you will take the face value times the stated interest rate times the time. Okay? So here is an example of what you need to be following there. I can't make that smaller, huh? We'll go up here a little bit. So here's the carrying value times the effective interest rate times time. This is our expense. The stated interest rate times the face value. This is our payment. So this will be the cash credit that we use, right? And then what we'll do with this interest expense is we will debit the expense, and the difference between these is going to be the discount on the bond payable. So when you go up to here, we have the interest expense, we have what we're paying, our interest payment, and the difference is the discount on the bond that we, remember this is a contra account, so that a debit normal balance, now it's going to be a credit. Okay. The next one tells us pay cash or trustee for semi-annual interest payment on $500,000. You got 6.5 bond issue with a carrying value that's actually higher. We're going to have a premium here, okay? But it's still the same thing. When we're trying to find the interest payment, like when we did the interest payment here, we took the face value times the stated interest rate times the half year. Well, we're going to do that here. Face value times the stated interest rate times a half year, and we will get the payment. Then we take the carrying value times the effective interest rate times time to get our interest expense. So when you're looking at it here, this is what you're looking at. No matter what, the interest payment is done off the face value, and the interest expense, as you can see, because the interest rate's different, we're multiplying off of different values, we'll have a little lower expense. And so when you have a little lower expense, you will get the bonds at a premium. You still debit the interest expense just like you do up here. We're still crediting cash for our payment. And now just that since the credit is bigger, the premium is the difference. Whereas here the credit's less, so the discount is credited. So you'll have to find this. I'm not even sure if it's on your application or not. You might have to get some scrap paper and figure these out. But as long as you can find the interest payment for these, and then you take the carrying value times the new effective interest rate, you'll get the expense. This time remains constant. That should be it. Good luck.